Local 4 News starts now with a breaking news alert.
And that breaking news is coming from the state. Governor Whitmer is tying the state's reopening plans to the number of people vaccinated here in Michigan. And she just unveiled a 4-step plan that will automatically trigger the loosening of COVID restrictions once a certain percentage of the state population that is eligible has received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Right now, here's where we stand. Nearly 49% of Michigan residents have at least gotten one shot. The first reopening tier begins when we hit 55%. Nearly everything lifts when we hit 70%. Local 4's Rod Maloney. Local 4's Rod Maloney joining us now live with a breakdown of what happens and what will reopen with each step. Rod?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, Evrod. You know, the governor has been asked by the legislature quite regularly, what's the plan out? What does it look like? Well, this is what they've actually worked on together, according to the governor today. And here is the thing. She says that as a metric, if 55% of Michiganders end up vaccinated, and then it's 2 weeks after that, in other words, you've had both vaccinations and then 2 weeks, that we can get in-person work for all business sectors, and that's about 4.5 million people. Then she says if we get to 60% of Michiganders vaccinated plus 2 weeks, which is about 4.8 million people, increased indoor capacity to 25%, sports stadiums, conference centers, banquet halls, funeral homes can have increased indoor capacity, and then you can have indoor capacity at 50% for gyms and exercise facilities, and lifts the restaurant and bar curfew. She says she believes that we can get there sometime by the end of May. At least that was her estimation. But she says, you know, a lot of things could happen, so we have to watch for that. In the meantime, when we get to 65% of Michiganders vaccinated plus 2 weeks, which is about 5.2 million people, all indoor capacity limits will be removed, but requires social distancing inside. It also relaxes residential social gathering limits. And then finally, she says we get to 70% of Michiganders vaccinated plus 2 weeks, would lift gatherings and face mask orders. Now, the MDHHS will no longer employ the broad mitigation measures unless, of course, there is something unanticipated that comes along in the spread. So let's hear from the governor about what she had to say about why it is that she's doing all of this.
We may be one of the first that really has put together a plan of this nature, and we're proud of this work. We think that it really is the kind of goal and hope that we need. And it's an opportunity for us to all join arms and to make sure that we get to this goal. Now, it is dependent on people, though, of course, just like everything the last 15 months. It's dependent on Michiganders availing themselves of these incredibly important vaccines.
So the governor ties vaccinations to us loosening restrictions. And I asked the governor, what if we don't get to 65 or 70%? She didn't directly answer the question. She just said she would like to see as many people in Michigan get the vaccine as they can. Reporting live, Rod Maloney, Local 4.
All right, Rod, thank you. Meanwhile, the state's top medical executive says that cases and hospitalizations are trending down here in Michigan, so some good news there. Dr. Johnny Caldoun says that cases are about 30% lower than they were 2 weeks ago, but still much higher than what we saw in February.
Data still indicates that we have broad community spread. This includes spread of the more easily transmitted variants that have been identified across the entire state. The percent of tests that are positive is about 13.2%, nearly 3 times where we were in the middle of February, but down by 4.3% from where we were just 2 weeks ago.
Just yesterday, we added more than 4,300 new cases and 38 more deaths. Of course, we're going to be getting another case update sometime this afternoon. New at noon, former State Health Director Robert Gordon testifies before the State House Oversight Committee. Now, these are his first public comments since abruptly resigning in January. Gordon testified today about what led up to his resignation. Here's a part of what he had to say.
I was called on January 22nd to a video conference call with several members of the governor's staff. I joined that call, and when I arrived, I saw the governor and members of her staff. And the governor said to me, Robert, grateful for your service. I think it's time to go in a new direction. She subsequently dropped off the call. Mark Totten, the governor's chief counsel, offered me an opportunity to resign, and I did.
Well, last month, Governor Whitmer and Gordon both agreed to waive the confidentiality agreement portion of the separation agreement. Lawmakers wanted to learn more about that agreement, which was worth more than $155,000. House Republicans argue the severance payment might have violated a provision of the Michigan Constitution. We want to get to even more breaking news at this hour. Bobby Ferguson is getting out of prison. A federal judge granted release to the friend of former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick on compassionate grounds. He was convicted and sentenced to 21 years for extorting millions from the city during his time as a contractor. This comes 3 months after former President Trump, commuted former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick's 28-year sentence. Ferguson will still have to pay more than $6 million back to the city. All right, so we are in the middle of a rainy Thursday afternoon out there. Let's get a check at the forecast. Not complaining, Brandon, about the rain today because we saw such beautiful sun yesterday and the day before. But is there any chance that we're going to see some sun today?
Not likely, Evrod. Maybe a little bit late afternoon, early evening, but we're in the middle of a rainy day and also in the middle of a moderate drought. So this is much needed rain on the lighter side, pushing through Livingston, Oakland, and at least the northern half of Macomb County into St. Clair County and parts beyond into southern Ontario. Still have these upper 40s and low 50s, hasn't moved all morning. And the winds are lighter, but they're out of the north today, and it will keep pooling in some cooler air. So we're stuck in the 50s. We have a couple of rounds of rain likely shutting off by 5 or 6 p.m. and a quick cool down, Evrod, followed by a beauty of a weekend still ahead.
We are excited for that. Brandon, thank you. Today, President Biden is marking his 100th day in office. And just hours after delivering his first address to a joint session of Congress, the president is wasting no time at all taking his sweeping agenda pitch on the road. Now, he's on his way to Atlanta for a drive-in car rally there. Tracy Potts is in Washington, D.C. for us this afternoon with a look at the key takeaways from last night's speech.
In a speech that lasted just over an hour, the president talked about jobs 43 times. He also rolled out a new initiative, the American Families Plan, that he's on the road explaining today.
After just 100 days, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again.
Touting his pandemic response and COVID relief, President Biden is pitching a complement to his jobs plan, the American Families Plan, including free preschool and community college, low cost or free childcare for lower income families, extending child tax credits, paid family leave, all paid for by higher taxes on those who earn $400,000 or more.
It's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of Americans to just begin to pay their fair share. Just their fair share.
The biggest job-killing tax hikes in a generation.
In the Republican response, Senator Tim Scott called the president's plan an expensive government overreach.
Washington, even more in the middle of your life, from the cradle to college.
The president urged Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act next month by the first anniversary of Floyd's murder.
We've all seen the knee of injustice on the neck of Black Americans. Now's our opportunity to make some real progress.
But 3 months in, the actions of the president and his party are pulling us further and further apart.
President Biden asked Republicans to join Democrats in passing new gun laws. He talked about Russia, China, ending the war in Afghanistan, and climate change. But his focus in Atlanta today, the Families Plan, getting it through Congress by this summer.
The White House says the president's plan may in fact be broken up into smaller pieces of legislation and that they're willing to hear more ideas about how to pay for it besides raising taxes on the wealthy. I'm Tracy Potts.
Tracy, thank you. Good news on the economy now that shows the country might be rebounding from the pandemic recession. The nation's gross domestic product, the output of goods and services, grew at 6.4% last quarter. Experts think it was fueled by government aid and declining COVID cases. But it comes as new unemployment filings dropped last week to 553,000, making that the lowest level since the pandemic first began. Well, filling up your gas tank might be a little tough for you this spring. We'll tell you why there's less gas to go around and how it could send prices soaring. And the coronavirus crisis in India is just getting worse as the days go on. Hospitals continue to struggle as the country hits a grim global record.